I'm happy with. I'm happy with. So good afternoon or morning, everyone. My name is Brian Kauma, and I'll be your host today for this JAR seminar series, the Zimbabwe Historical Association seminar series. We have these online webinars where we come different scholars from different disciplines with a common interest and just share and discuss different topics of interest. So today is a very special day. We have Susan Ziki, who's presenting for us today. I remember meeting Susan when I used to be at the University of Zimbabwe myself. She was a tiny little undergraduate student. That was like many, many, many moons ago. And today, here she is, she's presenting for us some work from her doctoral, something from her doctoral work. So this is like many, many moons later. And so I'm very excited and very proud to hear what Susan has to say. But before we get into the talk, just a few housekeeping issues. It may happen that this Zoom meeting just abruptly cuts. I don't know why it does that. It's not my fault, disclaimer. But in the event that it does that, may we use the same link and the same details to log back into the meeting. And for those who perhaps may be challenged in terms of the network bandwidth, feel free to also mute your, switch off your cameras, the mics remain mute. Of course, we'll put them on when we have the discussion and question and answer segment. But other than that, much of the time should not be spent by me talking. I hand this time over to Susan. Susan will give you about 20, 30 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes to just give us your presentation, then we talk thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming today. So I am Susan Ziki and I am a PhD student at Kent State University in the US, and Professor Skanekia is my advisor. So today I'm going to talk about my PhD prospectus. It's something very unusual here in the Zimbabwe Historical Association to perhaps propose a topic. So usually people come here to present their findings, their chapters or their dissertations, whatever. But today it's a kind of a different thing for me because I'm going to talk about my prospectus on market women. Can you all see my screen?
Yes,
yes.
You can see it.
Okay. So the topic is market women connections, emotional, social, and intimate networks in the Zimbabwean informal economy. From 1980 to 2021, maybe by the time I end in 2024 or 2023, 2024, 2025, I will say 1980 to 2024. Yeah, so it's actually a different kind of thing that I'm trying to do with my thesis, maybe perhaps different from my master's and honors thesis, in honors dissertation. So I'm going to focus on market women in Machpisa and Mbare mostly, like they are kind of my epicenters where I will engage with different market women and men as well, like for comparative or for maybe a gendered approach to my study. So Machpisa and Lusaka Machpisa are going to be part of the thesis and Mbare as well. So these are kind of oldest markers in Harare, so that's why I'm very much interested to trace them historically. So my thesis will focus on market women's intimate ties, personal relationship, and mobilities to maybe I hope to kind of evaluate how these affect market women's activities. So it's kind of a departure from the traditional understanding of market women's activities through perhaps an economic lens that focus on market women entrepreneurship, or that focus on market women and informalization of the Zimbabwean economy. Sorry, my laptop is misbehaving and it's kind of hard. So in this understanding, like for example, so when I'm talking about intimate networks, I want to engage intimate networks, market women mobilities, and market women's emotions. So for the intimate networks, I would like to see what is the role of intimate ties in market women's activities. So usually when we talk about intimate networks or intimate ties, people usually thought about relationships between husbands and wives, or maybe girlfriend and boyfriend. But my understanding is that intimate networks can engage more with other kinds of friendships or other kinds of family ties. So those are kinds of intimate networks that I'm going to look at, and on how maybe market women care or commit to each other, or how they may have confidence and trust each other, maybe trust each other with their businesses, how they can share information that will help the other person, and maybe that kind of interdependence that market women may have amongst themselves. So in this case, this is what I'm going to look at, their intimate ties. Of course, I'll also engage with the intimate ties with family members and their partners as well, and see how these intimate ties and networks actually affect their activities as market women. So trying to tie the histories of intimate networks and emotional histories, I'm also going to look at how can we account for market women's emotions? What kinds of emotions do they engage with, and how do these emotions affect market women's activities? How do these emotions reflect on maybe sectional conflicts in the markets, or how do they play a role in resolving different kinds of conflicts? How do market women perform, like as they show their emotions? For example, you may see it maybe through facial expressions, you may see it through what they do or their reactions, or you can also talk to them and hear what they say about their emotions. So that's another way to engage on the histories of emotions, how have these emotions impacted women's activities throughout history. So then I'll engage with the market women's mobility. So it's like a kind of a three-way thing. In market women's mobilities, I would like to see different kinds of mobilities that they engage in, maybe intra-urban or very translocal mobility, and regional mobilities, and then maybe inter-urban mobilities. How do these mobilities shape or define women's identities or their images? How are they related to specific locations? How do they identify themselves with these locations? So in this case, that's what I'm also going to look at, like how are market women's mobility is connected to their intimate networks as well. So yeah, that's basically what I'm going to look at. So I just put like a list of some of the historiographical books that maybe focus specifically on market women. Of course, it's not just these books, but there are many others that engage with market women. So mostly what I realize is that scholarship on market women mostly talk about market women's activities, sometimes as survivor, sometimes as depicting women empowerment, or maybe how they try to accumulate wealth in order to facilitate mobility, upward mobility. But whatever strand or maybe conceptual framework these scholarships have used mostly is to write about women's agency and show how women are actually central to the overall economies of different countries, and perhaps how they have played a critical role in political mobilization in these markets. So that's why I'm trying to do some kind of a different approach. So I will definitely be a participant observant, and as I do this, I would like to see maybe different expressions, how the overall market system works, how the hierarchies of power are actually organized as people engage with market activities. So I will also use some kind of an life histories approach. I think this is actually also helpful in engaging with different narratives from different generations that have occupied this market stores over the years, and how they have changed or how they have impacted each other throughout history. And for maybe historical analysis, I also engage with the archives. I'm not sure what kind of information that I find from the archives yet, but mostly of how Highfields or Mbare originated as the cities, or how the people have been relating to the municipality and other political issues. Perhaps they could be archival. And then so in conclusion, what I'm trying to do here is maybe to find if there is kind of a connection. I'm hoping to see if there is an intersection on how market women's mobility and identity, on how market women's intimate and social ties, and market women's emotions, how they engage with each other, if they can intersect, and how they actually affect market women's activities in general. So that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Susan, for that presentation. Brief, succinct, but very detailed. And I'm sure from the conversation that's about to emerge is going to show that it's a very promising and very interesting topic. But allow me, before I open the floor to everyone to talk, to somewhat abuse my chairmanship. This really happens. I'm usually a kind soul. I have one question, and I'll pose the first question. Which market, you're speaking about market women and you're wanting to engage the market. Can you perhaps dissect in which markets, which sectors you're specifically trying to target and look at? In particular, I'm drawn to your case studies. You have Machipisa and Highfields, which have over time have developed into commercial hubs for tertiary, secondary, and primary substances. You'd go to Mbare, for instance, you have the whole main agricultural rank that services agricultural products within an urban space, versus if you go to Machipisa, which is more well built up, you have your more commercial and tertiary services being supplied. So when you are referring to market in this case, also since you added the word intimate within your topic sentence somewhere there, there's a bit of a hazy confusion. Perhaps can you shed more light onto that? And now I'll also open to everybody else, but in order of preference, abusing my chairmanship again, I'll perhaps I'll call upon you, Supervisor Tim, to perhaps give one or two words before maybe perhaps build on what you've said, or also pose questions that he's always been wanting to ask you, but for various reasons has not. So he can also go ahead and ask.
Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me okay? Okay, thanks. I think I'd defer to let other people ask questions first, and maybe at the end I could say something, but I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. It's very Zimbabwean of you to do that. And in the United States, they just forget about us, professors. So in these kind of forums. So I'll wait till the end, if perhaps, but I'd like to hear what other people in the association have to say first. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Thanks. So we'll take the second question rather, from Aldrin, and then we'll give it to Ngacheka to also pose thereafter. Then Susan perhaps can respond thereafter.
So this is just when I was listening to your talk, something that sort of struck me, the way you were sort of articulating the ideas of these women, and I was thinking, if we call them workers or if we call them business women, will it change anything? Why am I asking this? I'm thinking about perceptions also from the community. The idea that either we call them vendors, we call them market women. I think direct translation will be, if we were to use Shona, and I might even miss Sika, mothers who sell at small places or at the market, right? What about if we call them workers? What about if we see them as business women? Is the narrative going to change? And also I was thinking, markets, they have this naming that is very, very common. You go to Mbare as a unit is also sort of broken into different sort of units, where people talk about Prevarimi. There are different names, different sections. Who is naming these sections? I think there's a lot you can get from naming. Who's naming? What does the naming do? Does it empower the women? Is it the women who are involved in naming? What does it mean? Machipisa, the naming of Machipisa. What does that mean? And also, I hope you will also engage with stereotypes. Stereotypes, I think, is a big issue, especially when it comes to these women. And also, I think from my experiences, these stereotypes are also generational. Different generation, like they suffered from different stereotypes. And I'm thinking, how do these women engage with these stereotypes? Do they embrace them? Do they push back against these stereotypes? Are these stereotypes to their advantage? Do they use them to their advantage? Who is creating these stereotypes? So I'll be interested in the history of these stereotypes also.
Thank you.
Hi, Susan. No, I'm so excited to hear finally about what your work is focusing on. And I want to, say this is important work and very fascinating in many ways. What I wanted to, get a sense of from you, for now, our two main issues. I think we can get a conversation after this. But I was really wondering if you want to also think more about the contestations that exist, in these marketplaces or between market women. And I want to believe that the idea of networks, from my experience, growing up in the marketplace and having, accompanied my mother to different markets and my father as well, there are, encounters and networks that women have, not only among women, but also, between women and men, women and politicians. And marketplaces as spaces of contestations, in my thinking, also, they also have boundaries that exist among people. If you go, for example, to the Sakuva marketplace in Mutare, you know that this side is where the Chipinge people come from, Wanamaive Marasha. Those who are selling charcoal. If you go to the other side, you see women from Wonde Valley, Wanamaive Banana. They are not allowed to go to the Chipinge women's side. But of course, people interact beyond their spaces. So I wanted to get a sense of how you want to think about those things in your work. I will stop there for now, and we can keep talking about other things.
Thank you, Nicholas. Brian, would you like for me to respond? Thank you very much for all your very insightful questions and maybe new avenues in which I can look at this topic. Yeah, Brian wanted to know like what sectors am I looking at? What kind of markets? Like I mentioned Machpisa, and you said like vegetable or produce markets, maybe in Bare. Yeah, they also have that in Lusaka, Machpisa. They have like a produce market in Machpisa. So what I was trying to do was actually focusing on what I am hoping to do actually is to focus on groups of market women who engage with local produce, mostly local produce. So I'm hoping that maybe I can try to marginalize those who engage with imported products, like those who do cross-border trading and also have their stores at Machpisa or any other sections. So I'm trying to neglect or maybe avoid engaging with those who do cross-border trading, because I don't want to look into cross-border trading. So my focus is mostly, I hope to just look at those who engage with local produce and local markets. So maybe their connections because of the everyday interactions that they may have. That's why I need to look at the intensity of their interactions. That doesn't mean that maybe cross-border people do not go there or do not have intimate networks or do not have social bonds. They may do, but I feel like it will be very much bigger, like it will be a too much big project to engage with all those vendors if I do this for my dissertation. Maybe for another project, then I can look at just cross-border traders in Machpisa or Mbare sections. And she also wanted to know what I mean by intimate networks. Mostly, these are kind of personal relationships that I'm going to look at, like very personal relationship, or they may include even those relationships of sex workers, or they may involve emotional or physical contact. They may also involve intellectual engagement, but they also involve family ties and maybe ties with colleagues that women create. So those kinds of intimate networks or intimate ties that they create. So for Dr. Aldrin, thank you very much. I think it's more like new avenues in which I can actually look at this. So I'm really going to maybe you look at how you emphasize how I can use stereotypes, definitely on how women can actually react to different kinds of stereotypes. Right now, I do not know any much information about these things or how it can affect maybe the reactions by women, but maybe if I engage with this when I do my field research, definitely I'll get more from it. I haven't thought much about how the narrative will definitely change if I say the women can be workers or business women or versus being market women. Maybe as I write, maybe I can actually see if it changes anything. But I feel like why people usually call them market women, not business women, is because they are small scale. Their small scaleness, maybe that's why they are called market women, or maybe the nature of their activities or their businesses, why they are called market women. Usually people associate kind of businesswoman identities with women who do big businesses, maybe like could be indie who do like they could be industrial, like those kinds of business women, different from the market women who may do like a small scale. I don't know. I'll actually look into how this can actually help me maybe to engage more with differences or how it can change my narrative as well. And thank you very much, Nick, for mentioning contestations. Yeah, so actually I was thinking maybe when I look at contestations, I would like to see the emotions that we market women invest in these contestations, how the intimate networks can help maybe resolve or maybe facilitate contestations, and how women mobilities and identities can actually trigger different kinds of contestations, like as you mentioned, categorization of women, like that's maybe this kind of hierarchies of power or maybe of organizational structures that are created, like how Marasha women or may not relate or may interact with other groups of maybe onion women or vegetable women, those kind of difference. It's kind of an identity associated with the kinds of products that women engage with. So I'm also going to look at that. I think that will give very good different narratives on these women's activities. Thank you. Back to you, Brian.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Susan. I will take two questions, one from Admayam Seba and another from Tinashe Takua. But just a gentle reminder, we have about 5-6 minutes left on this meeting. So if it cuts off, can you please just log on to the next meeting using the exact same credentials. But for now, Dr. Mseba.
Okay, thank you, Susan. I really enjoyed the talk. My apologies, I came a bit late, but I saw the title, and it was, I think, 1980 to 2021. And I'm particularly intrigued by the social history that we are taking, and wondered why 1980, because 1980 invokes a political date. So I wondered why 1980 does have to be the cutoff point for market women that may not have anything to do with political dates.
Thank you very much, Professor Seba. Yeah, it's kind of a very difficult decision to begin in the 1980s. Oh my God, is it? Oh.
Or rather, while you are doing, let me rephrase in a less mysterious way. The social history is compelling, but my sense is that market women's histories have their own turning points that have less to do with turning points in the political history of Zimbabwe. And so, could you convince me why the story, this very important story of market women, the social history of these women, have to be told, or have to be, their turning points have to be marked by political transitions?
Yeah, 1980 is a political date that marks maybe Zimbabwean independence, but then maybe it may not have been directly linked to market women's activities, because we see market women's activities even before that. During the colonial period, there are a lot of market women activities as women started to move to urban areas and set up their markets there. So it was just kind of a provisional date that I said for myself, that maybe as I look into different intimate networks, then I'll be able to explain if these intimate networks and women's mobilities maybe deny or maybe do not consider boundaries or binaries set by the colonial government in maybe even starting in the 1980s. So it's I think I said it as a way to show that even ties proceeded, like even after independence, these ties continued after independence. Because when I do my my fieldwork, I would definitely look at the time before that to show how maybe the initial establishment of Machipisa market set up a generation of women who began business, but then continued afterwards, even after independence, and how their ties with their children and their children's children continued to establish a legacy where the colonial or the post-colonial government could not remove them or could not disconnect the networks they created. Sorry. Yeah, I think that maybe I will look much, much better to see a good justification for that. Thank you, Professor Admire.
Okay. All right, before we take a break, we'll take a question from Tinashe.
Okay, thank you so much, Susan, for your presentation. I enjoyed the proposal. It is very promising. I just wanted to ask if you can think in terms of the relations that you talk about and the connections of these women, if you can think perhaps beyond women in Machipisa, for instance, or in Mbare, for instance, as you go to fieldwork, maybe to think beyond those specific locations to see if their locations, if their connections, their relations go beyond Mbare, go beyond where they are selling, where they are buying and selling these things, to maybe the source of the produce. If the people, if the farmers who are coming with the products at Mbare Msika are coming from Wonde Valley, do these women also create some relations to know, perhaps simple questions to know when this particular farmer is coming with the produce? Do the relations go to that point beyond the marketplaces in Mbare and in Highfield, to the sources of the produce, to some relations with the farmers, sort of? Thank you.
Okay, and sorry, if you could just allow me. Yes, if you could just allow me to just also throw in a question to add on to what has been said by Tinashe. Your timeline stretches up to the present. And when I look at my WhatsApp in particular, the status section, there are a lot of market women in quotes who are advertising different boutiques, different products that they're all selling. And the reason I have access to seeing their statuses is because of an existing intimate network that happens between myself and them, where I have their number and they have mine. You may perhaps also would also like to juggle and consider these ideas of that modern type of marketing strategy that has now come about. Also, more in particular, in the sense that I already know them. So what are the odds that I'm the market that is going to be constantly buying from them? Does that market ever grow beyond just me being the only person that sees it? Because I do not share that status. It's just always going to be a Brian-Susan intimate relationship. Do these markets ever go beyond to include other customers and other clients in between? With that being said, please feel free to join us in our same meeting, same details as you used to join in this particular meeting. Thank you.
Part of my question is being raised by Tinashe Taku. But I would also be interested to how much outside of the market is Susan going with the research. Also having as I also have a background in this business, there are things that I experienced. For example, you have to establish relationships with security guards. You have to establish relationships with combi drivers, because most of these people sometimes go to their markets at 4 a.m., 3 a.m., sometimes they sleep. So they have to establish relationships with security guards, taxi, combi people. They also have to establish relationships with political party cartels. Like you can't successfully establish a market at Mbare Msika or Machipisa or wherever without having a relationship with these Chipangano or whatever guys. You also have to establish relationships with you know, sometimes these women have to walk long distance. They have to establish relationships with people who walk them at 3 a.m., at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., so that they arrive at the market safely. So there are a lot of networks that are outside of the core Mbari, Machipisa, Glenview markets. Some of the networks are actually at the locations. There's someone who has to walk you to the Kombi rank so that you pay them. These networks, you'll be paying them. So I'm not sure if she's going that much, but it will be interesting if she captures those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lottie and Sinashi. Definitely, yeah. I really hope to go beyond the Machipisa and Mbari markets. They are just kind of my epicenters where I then trace the connections to other regions. That's why I said when I look at market women's mobilities, I'll also look at intra-urban, inter-urban, and regional mobilities of these women. Actually, when I want to propose my topic, I would like to start with maybe the story of my mother. Not residing in Harare, but residing in Nyanyazi in Manicaland, how they collected different African crafts like baskets, wooden sticks or migoti, and many other African crafts, and then they went to sell them at Kada House during the 2000s and beyond that. Like, so they have to establish connections with bus drivers like Kukurakurerwa bus drivers. They could ferry them from the row home to Harare, and then afterwards they will go back and then go to Chipinge to exchange maybe the clothes they have sold in Harare to exchange them with maize or with bananas, with avocados. Then they may go to Shirezi. It's another regional connection in which they know different people from these different places. So those kinds of connections, yeah, definitely I'm going to look at them because they are very critical to show how women who may have been able to maintain contact with different groups because of their vast kinds of mobilities as they moved across Zimbabwe. Definitely, thank you very much, Dr. Lottie and Sinashi. Yeah, definitely I'll look at the regional connections. I haven't actually thought about like relationships with political cartels. That's very insightful. Thank you very much. Yeah, the Chipangano and how you can establish ties with the maybe councils or the police to overcome difficulties when it comes to times of maybe demolition, or if you actually want a specific place to sell your products. Yeah, definitely there will be those kinds of ties as they participate in the market. Thank you very much. I would definitely take those as very good insights. Brian?
Oh, okay, yes. We'll take another set of questions from Nicholas and Aldrin as well.
Thank you, Brian. Susan, so, as you were talking, I think some of the questions are raised by Tinashe and Lottie. I am, thinking also about other networks of having access to funds. Yes, transportation networks, but funds, for example, the intimate networks that you are talking about between women, market women, I want to believe also goes beyond them sharing spaces in the marketplace to also, helping each other, trusting each other to, give each other money, like, in Zimbabwe, people call rounds and other things, right? And beyond those groups of networks of, helping each other financially, they also have their own groups, for example, burial associations for those women. So the networks, in my view or my experience, go beyond being able to sell their, goods in marketplaces, but taking care of themselves. So I'm wondering, if you are also wanting to engage with, scholarship on care, and solidarities. And I want to then end with thinking about networks of resilience and how different, political, socioeconomic circumstances have changed women's networks over time. If you want to think, for example, of the COVID situation now, or the economic crisis time, or even election, political violence, how does that change these networks? When do people trust each other or not, decide not to trust their colleagues?
So part of what I wanted to say, I think Nyachega has just alluded to that when you look at these markets, it's bigger than the marketing of the produce that they are selling. It incorporates a lot of things. And also links to my earlier comment on business, seeing them as business women and as workers. Why I sort of came up with that question is that the fact that when you look at how, especially the stereotypes, when you look at how we think about market women, and then when you look at what they have, some of them what they have, you probably sort of start thinking, are these just market women, as in Wanamaiwe Msika? Because I know in Mutare, where I'm from, most of these market women are the people who own a lot of residential stands and houses in Hobart. Some of them, they even pay for their produce when it's still on the farm, like they will buy the whole farm. So I was thinking, why I sort of came up with that, I was thinking about cartels. The hierarchies, even on the market, there are hierarchies. Who gets to sell cabbage? Who is allowed to, and why? Who gets to have access to tomatoes, and why? How? So there are these cartels, and I think the way these women organize themselves, there is that business structure in the organization, which I think sometimes we miss when we just treat them as market women. I think these women are very, like, the way they organize themselves is very, very complex, and it takes a business model. The other thing, it's about the relationship, especially with market women and naming. By naming, I mean when you are a man, the relationship with men who are also on the market. I generally notice this way of so men are sort of feminized. This marketing. It's sort of a female role of marketing. So when men are joining in the market, they have to conform to a hierarchy where women are the leaders, rather than them taking the role of marketing. So I think women, in terms of the markets, they're the queens. They control what happens. I'm interested in that relationship. How is that relationship built? Especially when you have women who have their husbands who are also part and parcel of the business itself. Even if the man is the one doing the capital, the dynamics is a little bit different when you look at it. Women tend to have that sort of control. Why is that? That's what I was also interested in.
Okay, thank you, Tinashe, for that. Susan, before you respond, we'll take another question from Prof. Masakure, and then you respond to all the questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Susan, for the presentation. Here, it's just a comment. I'm just thinking of what Dr. Mseba has spoken about, the time period. And also, I think Nicholas has also given a comment on that. Yes, you can go before 1980, but I think you can also try to find in 1980 what I will call a fragment of history, probably a particular event that is linked to women and markets. and use that as an entry point into trying to understand why you use 1980 as a start-off point. My knowledge of Mbare and markets in Zim is a bit limited, but I can just give an example of what is happening in Mozambique in the 80s, where Frelimo would organize through its women's league. They would actually organize women's markets. So that's more like a political. It's coming from politics, but then influence the market. And I would like to think, this is just a speculation, there's a probability that during 1980 or just towards independence, there were certain women who are closely linked to ZANU-PF who might have, like organized themselves, like within these markets, and then would use the opportunity of a new independent government to try and leverage themselves. So I don't know whether it happened. It might be a possibility. I'm just thinking aloud here, but you might then try to think of a particular fragment of history, and then that took place in the 80s, in 1980, and then use that as the start-off period. If you don't want to go in 1979, where you might have different dynamics with 78, 79 with Muzorewa and probably their own politics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to go, so can I just jump in to clarify my point? What I was suggesting was that what's fascinating me in your project is that this is a social history. I haven't heard of any kind of those kinds of histories. And I'm just being rebellious about the social history being dictated by political history. So I was suggesting to you to tell the history to have your to have the social history, the women experiences, give yourself room for the women's experiences to shape where you begin and where you end. I was just being skeptical about political history creeping into a very fascinating social history. That was the point that I wanted to bring to your attention, but I have to go. So thank you once again for that insightful talk.
Thank you very much, sir, for your contribution.
Sorry, Susan. Can I just add one small question?
Yeah, sure.
The Tinashe and Nyachega have been speaking about the issue of stereotypes and engaging with stereotypes. Is the focus on market women in particular also not working into the already existing stereotypes? Presently in Zimbabwe, based because of the whole economic downturn and everything and the huge unemployment, you've seen an extensive load of men who traditionally used to work in the industries and become breadwinners in the formal sector, now engaging within this informal sector today. And you see the battles that they have with the city council and the police and all that. So would you perhaps just want to engage it slightly beyond just looking at the element of women within the informal sector, but also engaging with Zimbabwean society within the informal sector perhaps? Because for a period of time, yes, I do agree, the earlier years, you have a lot of women dominating this sector, but then with the change over time, by ignoring the presence of men, would it richly capture the significant changes and the good social history that you're trying to bring about that has been made, which also Tinashe did also mention, where you have certain bigger women, Ospateleni, they'll call them in Bulawayo, among the developers. Those essential and critical changes over time, would alienating the male voice from the study manage to roundly and richly capture that? I don't know. I'm just being mischievous.
No, that's really correct, Brian. That's really fine. I think Magaya mentioned feminization. So in feminization of men. So definitely I'll look into men's accounts as well. I think this will present kind of a gendered approach to what I'm trying to do. So I will look into both men and women's accounts, despite the fact that mostly my narrative is about market women. I will not neglect men's account in this history, so that I will have like some kind of a gendered approach to understanding how gender has been transformed by involving more men into the market as well. I would look into that. It's very critical because I cannot present an account of just women's perspectives without presenting the men's side of view as well. From what others have said earlier, I think definitely I would take this as maybe insights into what I'm going to do as well, like new frameworks to look at market women's activities. I think the Nicholas and Dr. Masakure and Dr. Magaya and Dr. Msebo gave me like very critical ways in which I can look into market women's activities, and I will definitely try to incorporate these in my research when I do the field work. Brian.
All right. No, I don't know, Nicholas. Is that a current hand or it's like an old hand that's stuck?
It's a new one, and I'm really excited, you know, to hear Susan speak about your work. So forgive me if I end up talking too much, but just to throw an idea to you, Susan, and thinking about, you know, going forward, developing your work. I grew up in the market, and my mother was, you know, for so many years, she has been going to the market companies. My father is a market man, as to the present day, in Heathcliff. So I grew up also seeing, you know, relationships that developed around people sharing food, people sharing stories, gossips, makua. So I am really wondering if you want to also think about that dimension of the marketplace and how relationships of intimacy and, you know, some other social patterns also developed from even sharing food and stories. Sometimes when you don't have customers for 3 hours, people are gossiping, people are networking in the social way. So I just wanted to throw that to you to think about, you know, other ways of, you know, approaching your work. I'm really excited. This is why I wanted to, you know, talk more. Thank you. This is my last contribution.
Thank you for that, Nicholas. I really think gossip is very critical when we look at market women, because it really constitutes maybe a bigger segment of what they do all throughout the day. They go in the morning and maybe some of them come back in the evening. Sometimes they don't even have like maybe customers, but they spend the whole day mostly gossiping. And in those gossips, you can actually hear more about their intimate relations with maybe other males in the market, or about their family relationships. They can gossip more, and how people may react to the gossips. You can actually see more emotions in their response to different types of gossips in the market. So I think looking at gossips too will really be helpful to illuminate into the dynamics of the ties and social bonds that women focus on. Hope you also. Yeah, sure. I would definitely focus on language too. Language is actually critical, like how it kind of changes over time, how the linguistics or the transition in how people talk about each other and how they use language, how they change maybe from auntie to a friend or to a very close friend. Those kinds of different namings in the language systems can also depict onto the larger extent of how people relate to each other in the market. Thank you, Dr. Magai.
All right. Yeah. Yes, I must admit as well, it's a very interesting and very fascinating discussion, and a very fascinating proposal and what that you do intend to do, which I have no doubt makes a very important and seminal contribution to several historiographical conversations within the history, social, environmental, and economic history of Zimbabwe and Southern Africa as a whole. I do not know if there are any further questions, any comments from anyone? Going once, going twice. Oh, yes.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I just wanted to thank everyone for all the great comments and questions. As I imagined, there were so many great insights and so many people have personal experience, growing up in market families, as well as Susan has. And so I think she's really onto something that's going to fit nicely into larger questions of African history and Zimbabwean history. But I would, I really appreciate that everyone's working so well to help with ideas, and as Susan develops the proposal and grant proposals and things like that, I hope people can continue to help her get to the point of doing her field work, and through that, it's really great to see this kind of energy and interest. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On a lighter note, Brian.
Yes.
So on a lighter note, I know of strategies, especially with the economy taking a downturn, and men were sort of getting into the market also. And women were complaining that, so when somebody comes with with produce, which is cheaper, right? So they sort of congregated the market, right? And start sort of grabbing what they want. But women were complaining that men are much stronger and they're taking all the best goods. So they developed a strategy, which was simple: use their bodies. So when they have somebody come with produce, women will make a circle. And if a man want to come, they will use their bums. So if you touch the bum, you are in trouble. So men will have to wait until women got everything, because they could not, because these ideas of bodies, how we perceive bodies and stuff for women and cultural, men could not squeeze in. So these are strategies that came up when men were also joining the market. So there are a lot of interesting stories that you can get from this. This is sort of a very interesting and explosive topic that you are going to enjoy the stories that you will get from the people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. It's very fascinating, and contemporary nature, there's so many interesting, juicy stories that you'll hear, and I can't wait to read the final product. But also, I'll say this, feel free to abuse anyone and everyone that attended today with the drafts, and if you need ideas. 3 of them I know that attended today have read my own work as well. I've managed to abuse them. They are very nice people. And yes, even from their comments, you can tell that indeed they have experience. Nyacheka can give you a life history on his own. He can dedicate chapter 3 to him. But no, thank you, everyone. Thank you. A special thank you to Susan for your presentation, and we wish you all the best. I think this time we can all just like unmute our mics and just give Susan a round of applause. And
Brian, I was wondering if Susan saw my comment in the chat. So
the children,
the children one, I think also, because I'm speaking from my experience, and I usually got annoyed when my mother told me to go to the market at noon. I wanted to go and play soccer. I knew it was Saturday time. I wanted to go and play soccer, and Mama is saying, go, stay behind. I want to go and do other things. So the people she left me in charge with, or who were like, taking care of me, were other market women who knew my mother so well. So I ended up, taking them as mothers again, beyond the market. When they see me misbehaving elsewhere, they would come back and report to mother. So that's another network that, comes in from that develops from, the market experience. So yeah, good luck.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. I'm not also sure, are you going to talk about witchcraft? Because it's also true.
Yeah.
Witchcraft is a key issue in those markets.
Accusations when people someone is having more customers than others. I think
yes,
actually some associated with witchcraft. Or
yes, some really go to Sangomas, they go to Mapostori, they witnessed it. It's something fascinating to
the body
that
Tinashe was referring to. When you see 10 of them lined up, you scout like, okay, that lady looks more pleasantly looking. Come and go and buy tomatoes from her as opposed to another. Yeah, I'm not confessing anything, but I'm just sharing.
Yeah, no, Brett. My mother would ask me to put, coarse salt or sea salt in that paper that you put money, because there are people who come when they buy, your money disappears. There are people you can't ask change from, because if you get their money, once you mix it with yours, it disappears. It's there in Mbari. You should also focus on that.
So, Susan, I think what Lotte said is very interesting. And so if I were you approaching these stories, I wouldn't worry about whether they are true or not, but thinking of them as how, they reflect to you as a historian, the social discourses in the market, right? Yeah. How people think about each other, the question of trust, the question of not trusting the customer or the next person, like Lotte said. Who do you give your money? Sometimes who do you leave your goods with, right? Yeah. So yeah, very interesting, and I'm really excited to see this, develop.
Yes. Thank you. Susan, once again, thank you very much, and we wish you all the best and an enjoyable academic journey. To everyone that participated, thank you very much for attending this JA webinar series. Hope to see you again next week. A round of applause to you. Please.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for your insightful contributions. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. Stay safe.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
See you next time on my first chapter.